Hey, Cameron from Met at the Movies bringing you my least favorite films of 2023. Honestly, if I had to generalize, I think 2023 was an improvement over last year. If nothing else, I feel like my scores did tend to lean a little bit more positive this year. Or at the very least, my intermediate scores expanded to the point that it was actually kind of hard to find 10 films that I had strong enough feelings about to really put on a worse list. And for a while, a lot of them could have just been dishonorable mentions. But fortunately, or unfortunately, the list did expand enough for me to get a legitimate worst list. Also, as typical disclaimers go for this kind of video, this is just my personal opinion. These movies aren't necessarily the worst movies of the year, they're just the ones that brought up the worst reaction in me. There were films that disappointed me, but I couldn't really bring myself to hate them either. There are also films I found to be overrated, but I didn't really dislike them, I just didn't like them as much as other people said I should. But let's get those dishonorable mentions out of the way first. Marlowe. I mean, I like Liam Neeson, I like noirs. All the pieces were there, but I had to fight to pay attention to this movie. Even after that, I still don't know if anything stuck with me. Silent Night. You gave an explanation for why the main character doesn't talk, and then you had all the other characters not talk too? Why wasn't this just a silent movie? It would have worked a lot better with the artistry that way. John Woo still makes some great fight scenes, though. Infinity Pool. Not on this list because I didn't finish it. That's right, for the first time since 2019, I left a movie theater early. This was the second of a double feature. The first one was already pretty bad, so I was not in a good mood. I really wasn't feeling it, to the point that I started scrolling the plot summary online just to see where this was going, eventually coming to the conclusion that, yeah, I think I would just rather get home 45 minutes early. The Amazing Maurice. Not all that amazing. Sundance. You chose this film? It's a Wonderful Knife. It's dumb, but I had a fun enough time with it, which is more than I can say for a bunch of the other films on this list. Alright, we got those out of the way. Now, here are my top 10 least favorite films of 2023. Number 10, Hypnotic. Or, as I like to call it, Nothing is Real, the movie. I remember reading reviews for the movie Basic, how it becomes so riddled with twists that after a while viewers just sort of lost interest. That was my experience with this movie. I mean, you can only be told that everything you've seen and been told so far in the film is a lie so many times before you just stop caring. It's no longer clever, it just makes your audience feel like they're being toyed with. Low on the list because, on paper, it's a fine movie, just not in execution. Number 9. I kinda didn't want to put this film on the list, but at the same time, I don't know how I could leave it off. Skinamarink. I honestly have a weird respect for this film for going such a different route, but I'm sorry, this movie's just not giving me anything to latch onto. And reading the plot synopsis, I would have totally watched this movie if it was done with a more traditional style. I mean, I like the movie Silent House after all, which got much worse reviews for some reason. Seriously, that poster shot is the most we see a full body in this movie. There's just not a movie's worth of material even in it. I'll probably later revisit it and put it in a list of films that are imperfect but fascinate me to some degree. Number 8. No, this film is not as low as you probably would have expected me to put it. Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. When I finally sat down to watch this film, I was expecting an irredeemable, so bad it's good dumpster fire of a movie. And that ended up making me very surprised when I saw that a lot of the filmmaking was actually pretty decent. Some great lighting, good camera work, and decent atmosphere at times. And that opening setup is very creepy. And all of this from a Winnie the Pooh horror concept? But the movie's biggest crime is that its main plot is just kind of bland and straightforward, instead of being bonkers, off the wall, or self-aware like it should be. It's kind of like two different movie ideas got mashed together, one dumb and one bland. And that is not a good combination. It honestly feels like a panic move, like they tried to dial back when they realized they had a crazy concept on their hand. No, you needed to go for it. Number 7. Another film that I wanted to put on this list, but also didn't, only because people were gonna be like, you put this lower than Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey? Yes. Thanksgiving. So I realized recently that in quite a few of my written reviews, I've said, this movie makes it clear right from the beginning what its style or intentions are. And then I kind of realized, oh, I guess what film doesn't, though? Found one. This one. There really was a missed opportunity to express what this movie was going to be like right out of the gate. It takes us multiple scenes before the facade of decentness starts to give way to whatever you want to call this. The editing cuts are weird, there's forced exposition just there to set up later abilities, dumb decisions, even some of the gore looks pretty uninspired, except for those severed heads. Those were pretty good. And I know there's gonna be plenty of people that are like, it's a grindhouse film, it's supposed to be like that. And fair, maybe I just need to watch more grindhouse films. For me though, it just doesn't feel intentional with this film. It just feels like an excuse to be lazy. Even the reveal of the bad guy is pretty tame, not that crazy or even satisfying. I rank this one worse than Blood and Honey because I was expecting Blood and Honey to be awful, and then was surprised to see some actually decent filmmaking. But I was all ready to love a very Scream Thanksgiving, and then was really disappointed with what I got. Which is a shame, because we need more Thanksgiving films. We can't rely on trains, planes, and automobiles forever. Number 6. Okay, so tell me if you've heard this one. A family is staying in an old house, but they don't know that something happened there a long time ago, and its presence might still be there. The Tank. Given its nice-looking setting, it could have at least been run-of-the-mill watchable if it had at least put in a little bit more effort. But man, did this movie not strive to be anything more than just the basics in plot. It's about as generic and washed-out looking as it comes, right down to the fact they couldn't even be bothered to give the lead a cheesy, heroic line in the climax. Ouch. Honestly, not even worth going into all that much. Number 5. A lot more Christian films made it to theaters this year, which I'm always happy about. Unless one of those films is The Girl Who Believes in Miracles, which... I'm also happy that, while most of them weren't great, very few of them were truly disheartening, like the 2 I had last year. Except for... Camp Hideout. Christian comedies, find a second setting. You've already done summer camps a lot, and only one of those has been pretty good. Corbin Bleu is the only saving grace in this film. Other than that, it is as standardly lame as it gets. Cliches upon cliches, really no new ideas at all. Full of underdeveloped plot points that go nowhere, not very funny, and just seems like an excuse to get a Home Alone-style third act where kids get to set traps for the adult bad guys. I got him, Charlie! At least A Week Away had great singing, dancing, and cinematography. Number 4. At least with Camp Hideout, lameness just kinda came with the territory. And it can be really challenging to make family-friendly wholesomeness look like anything but uncool. But you know what movie doesn't have that excuse? Back on the Strip. This is an adult comedy about getting a band of strippers back together. This should not be this lame. The jokes are telegraphed and cringy, the situations are forced, there's an early presence of Kevin Hart who never appears again, not that even he could save this film. All I kept thinking was, this feels like if a rated R movie was made by Disney Channel. Also, for a movie where the main character does magic, I found a lot of the tricks in this movie to be very rudimentary. Like, I have actual magician friends that do more impressive tricks than this. This was a movie with a budget, and it's like they just bought the first magic kit they could find. Number 3. After some pretty strong opening weeks, this was the first legitimate bad film of the year for me. Fear. Not since Body at Brighton Rock have I seen a movie where just every element of filmmaking was subpar. Acting, writing, direction, cinematography, score, pacing. I guess I don't have anything to say about the costumes, so there's that. This is probably the most amateur-feeling film on this list. A list that already includes Skinamarink. But Skinamarink felt like a bold stance to do something different, and this feels like a whatever. And I've seen plenty of low-budget films rise above their limitations. But Fear flounders with its bad line readings of terrible dialogue and nothing particularly compelling. Now that is really something to fear. Number 2. My worst viewing experience of the year. Definitely the one that felt the longest, and that in a year where I saw more 3+ hour films in theaters than ever before. Beau is Afraid. I've now accepted the fact that Ari Aster is a director that I'm just not going to get. I only barely understand his appeal with horror movies, and I definitely don't understand this. It's the kind of nonsensicalness that makes you surprised to hear normal conversation after you're done with the movie. Which, I've liked blatantly nonsensical movies before, but usually there's some fun with them. Unstoppable misery paired with nonsense is not fun. It is the definition of a nightmare. And I have enough of those in real life. This movie just feels like if the rock bottom episode of SpongeBob was stretched out over 3 hours. It's just bad thing after bad thing happening to our main character with absolutely no payoff to justify it. And I'm sure there are a lot of think pieces out there about people like me who just don't understand what this movie's all about. And you know what? As often as I feel inadequate in my opinions about movies, for once, I do not care. For me, returning to or even just re-examining this film would feel like reconnecting with a toxic ex who has already hurt me too many times to count. Eventually, I just have to recognize the red flags. If I had not seen this movie with my best movie buddy Josh, suffering through it with me, I do not think I would have been in a good enough mindset to drive home. Number 1. As sometimes happens, my personal pick for number 1 initially seems pretty inoffensive compared to the rest of these. And maybe it is just me. But, moving on. I may not understand Beau is Afraid, but I at least believe it accomplished what it set out to do. Whatever that may have been. It went all out. Moving On frustrates me because it is so non-committal. It doesn't commit to any of its angles. It doesn't work as a drama, it's inconsistent and tonally off. It doesn't work as a revenge flick, it fumbles through that with such perfunctory. It definitely doesn't work as a comedy. These are some of the limpest attempts at a joke I've ever seen. I never laughed once. I think I exhaled out of my nose twice. I feel like the movie is telling me it has a purpose, but the timing just isn't there. Or the urgency. Scenes just drift here to there with no momentum. It wants to unfold something slowly when they need to be legitimately established early on for you to really care. And I don't care about any of it. And I feel like the movie is telling me I'm a bad person for not caring. The one good thing about it, its title is a pretty good explanation for what I'll be doing with it and most of these other films. See you in the better half.